Hello, folks, and welcome back once again to Chris Wyatt Reports. Lest we forget, digging through the archives, I came across this Al Jazeera story, quite honest Al Jazeera story from 2004, 2 decades ago. 2 decades ago, this article dated June 3rd of 2004. I'm going to read much of the article and give a bit of commentary as we go along. Once they fought against the apartheid government, but today, many of South Africa's former freedom fighters are being scorned for using black empowerment laws to become multimillionaires. Where's this scrutiny at as Tokyo Sexwale and Cyril Ramaphosa hit the campaign trails, trying to drum up support for a collapsing political party? Now, the best known of the new black elite are Tokyo Sexwale, once a communist and former leader of the wealthy Gauteng province, and Cyril Ramaphosa, who led negotiations for the ANC with the apartheid government in 1994. That's actually an incorrect statement. He was at CODESA. That's the negotiations he led. Sexwale, then 51 years of age, drives a Jaguar and lives in a mansion in an upmarket suburb of Johannesburg. In the 1970s, the nouveau riche Sexwale trained with the Soviet Union's military. In 1994, Sexwale was elected as premier of Gauteng province, but was later lured into the private sector in 1998 when he established Mvulapanda Holdings, which has interest in, among others, mining and financial services. The value of Sexwale's assets and other holdings are unknown when this article was written 2 decades ago, but his shares were estimated to be worth at least 223 million US dollars. Now, poor old Tokyo, he had to survive on just 2 million rand a month a decade ago, back in 2014. I can't imagine what his expenses are today, a decade later. Now, how do we know that he was living on 2 million rand a month? Well, we learned of his modest living as a result of his divorce from his white wife, Judy's lawsuit. Now, this is what Sexwale had to say. I do not live a life of extravagant luxury, but the family is comfortable. Judy deluded herself into believing that I was a billionaire, said Sexwale in court papers, responding to a fresh legal bid by Judy Sexwale to extract higher maintenance payments from him pending their divorce back in 2014. 2 million rand a month. Those are his expenses. That's what he lives on. Wow. Poor old Tokyo Sexwale. And now he's out bringing up the ghost of Chris Honey to get people to vote for the ANC. Now, a World Bank report from April of 2020, and admittedly that's 4 years ago, before the impact of the ANC's illegitimate lockdown destruction of South Africa's economy, in April of 2020, showed approximately 55.5% of South Africa's population, or 30.3 million people, living in poverty at the national upper poverty line. This is the South African established poverty line, not the world standard. And that was 992 rand per month. Over half the population. Now, that number has only grown significantly since then as a consequence of ANC's idiotic macroeconomic policies and its racist decisions during the lockdown. And who are these poor? Well, they're mostly black South Africans. More black South Africans than nearly the entire population of South Africa back in 1994, when it was just 32 million people. Meanwhile, Tokyo Sexwale remains a very wealthy, albeit less rich man. According to Top Empowerment, Sexwale is worth 2.14 billion rand in 2024. 20 years after this Al Jazeera article. At current exchange rates, that would be just 110 million US dollars, quite a comeuppance from the estimated 223 million he was worth 20 years ago. Now, Sexwale is one of a number of black politicians who left the government to take up offers from the private sector. Firms wanted recognizable black South Africans with political context to hold interest in their companies so that they could benefit from government contracts while complying with the empowerment legislation, requiring them to have more black representation. In other words, the creation of a nouveau black riche elite coterie. One of the ANC's first tasks when it took power in 1994 is to draw up empowerment legislation to redress imbalances in the economy where whites held nearly all the wealth. The 52-year-old former mining union leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, also spent time in prison for opposing apartheid and was once named as a possible successor to Nelson Mandela before he accepted an offer from the private sector in 1997 and was pushed out, and Thabo Mbeki rose above him. But Cyril got his revenge and in 2018 became the president. Today, Ramaphosa, who is still a member of the ANC's decision-making executive, is estimated to have a multi-billion rand fortune with interest in mining and media. Don't forget McDonald's. Now, another black businessman who has made the most of empowerment laws, in other words, corruption, is mining magnate Patrice Motsepe, who, after signing several major empowerment deals, gifted equity, is estimated to be worth 500 million back then. That's really changed. Motsepe is worth about 1.8 billion US dollars today. Motsepe initially built much of his fortune on his own and has never been directly involved in politics. Well, that's not entirely true. He does have senior contacts in the ANC. Ramaphosa is his brother-in-law, and his business tycoon sister, Bridget Radabe, is married to an ANC cabinet minister. At the time, the government believes that its empowerment program is making headway. This is what corrupt politicians tell you, that they're having success while people live in abject poverty and die in filth. The Ministry of Trade and Industry says 10% of South Africa's companies are now Black-owned, but critics say that only a few are benefiting. Well, the critics were right. And what does it matter what's Black-owned? It's how much income and wealth people are able to accrue. Moletsi Mbeki, President Thabo Mbeki's brother and a top businessman, recently complained that the government's Black economic empowerment program had created a new and undeserving elite. Yeah, no kidding. And they're the clowns running the country today. The opposition Democratic Alliance, which was in its nascent stages back in 2004 when this article was written, the opposition Democratic Alliance says that Sexwale and Motsepe were involved in 60% of the 42.2 billion in empowerment deals that were done in 2003. Think about that. How corrupt is this system? The ANC, as Sexwale says, we're here to renew for South Africans. Yet in 2003, 60% of the deals went to him and Patrice Motsepe alone, not the other 22 million Black South Africans. Yeah. Yep. Sexwale insists that empowerment is not a government handout scheme. No, it's a scam. Government has only provided the right legislative environment for Black businesses to operate in. No, it's created an environment to create fake businesses to fleece white monopoly capital and create a nouveau riche. If you neglect the task, then someone else will take up that role and we'll be left with a misrepresentation of our history. Our history? The blatant racism was already in the open 2 decades ago. Folks just chose to ignore and dismiss it. The comments coming, of course, from Tokia Sexwale. Wow, who's out now evoking the ghost of Chris Hani to get Black South Africans to foolishly vote against their own self-interest and elect a party that has proven time and again it exists solely for the benefit of its cadres, its cadre. That's all its purpose is. It isn't to bring liberty to South Africans because it didn't do that. That's a lie. The ANC played a minor role in the end of apartheid, a minor role. The collapse of the Soviet Union played a far larger role than the ANC ever could have hoped to play in the liberation of South Africa. The ANC has proven that they're like every other African liberation movement. They're simply corrupt and don't know how to govern. Well, they do know how to govern for their benefit, not for yours. People need to stop looking at skin pigmentation and start listening to the facts. Travelgate, Oilgate, Nkandla, Pala Pala, Vreda Dairy Farms, the asbestos tender, digital vibes, the list goes on and on. PPE theft, a corrupt cabal of dancing clowns who pretend to care about Black South Africans. And every time they get caught and embarrassed, they start talking about gender-based violence, but they've never done anything to address the cultural and moral and religious decline of South Africa. This is an evil party of communists who have raped the country, and the people responsible for that are the people that vote for them. Stop voting for them and make the right choices, South Africa. Lest we forget, this story, an honest story written originally by AFP, the French press agency, carried by Al Jazeera, told the truth about the elite, connected, wealthy Black South Africans who are part of the ANC. Wake up, South Africa. Wake up. Stun some. Stun some. Thank you very much. God bless.